In today's film, we examine how Vietnam forever changed the lives of a close-knit squad of 5 African-American soldiers. Howdy, I'm Jeff Goldsmith, and this is the Q&A. My agenda is simple. Each week, I plan to bring you in-depth insights into the creative process of storytelling. Now, I got to say, folks, we have a great episode for you today. We have a return of screenwriter Kevin Willmott, who won an Oscar for BlacKkKlansman, and he co-wrote this movie with Spike Lee. And he did a fantastic job of basically presenting a multi-layered historical drama in which we are looking at Vietnam through the historical lens of what actually happened and the difficulty of the experience for African-American troops and how they were fighting for not only their rights at home, but a war abroad. So you have that duality. The other great element of the movie, adding to its duality as well, is the fictional aspect in which there are action movie tropes. There are heist film tropes of sorts without giving too much away. So there's a lot going on in this movie, and it was absolutely great to have Kevin back in the series. So I know you'll dig this episode. Now, for those of you that don't know, and you're just listening to the audio podcast, be it in iTunes or Spotify, we have started broadcasting in YouTube, our Zoomcast part of this, because we are doing these as Zoom interviews, and we're putting the audio in iTunes and Spotify. But if you want to see Kevin and I have a conversation through our magical computer screens halfway across, the country, you could do so by going to the Backstory Magazine YouTube page. You could find it all there for free, and you could just click on it and you could watch it there. Of course, speaking of watching things, don't forget To Five Bloods, Kevin Willmott's movie, opened today in Netflix. So you've got it in your pocket if you have a Netflix account. You could watch it on your phone. Please don't do that. Please watch it on a big screen because it is a beautiful movie. I hope you watch it on a screen bigger than a phone, but if you have to watch it on a phone, that's okay too. And of course, while you're looking around for things to do, I hope you'll check out Backstory Magazine, the magazine that I publish and love. You could save $5 off a 1-year subscription with coupon code SAVE5. And you could just enter that during checkout at backstory.net. As you know, Backstory Magazine can be read on a desktop or laptop, also on an iPad. And if you subscribe, we hope you'll do it through our website rather than Apple. So because through the website, you'll still get access to the web viewer that you could look at through a desktop or laptop, but you'll also get access with your same credentials to an iPad if you have one as well. So it's easier to just do it there at backstory.net. And I got to tell you, we have amazing things coming up because we are in the process of working on releasing issue 42, our new issue. And some of the things in it are articles I've been working on for like 5 to 8 years to try to get the rights to, and I've gotten them. So there's going to be really great content in there. And as we do with every issue, even after we publish, we're still going to be adding new stories to it as well. So we will keep updating the new issue 42 once we publish it. And with your subscription, you also get access to the last year's worth of stuff that we've done, the last year's worth of magazines in our archive. And our archive, of course, will be going back further in time beyond the past year, but the past year is definitely up and working right now. So we're going to be adding previous years as well. If you've never read us, you could, of course, test drive us by reading the free issue over at backstory.net. So I hope you do that as well. And you get it. Your support is crucial. And if you've supported our podcast in all these years and the other screening series that we've done in LA, I hope you check out backstory.net and consider supporting us now. But now, without any further ado, we are going to jump right into our Zoomcast podcast interview with co-writer Kevin Willmott as he discusses his latest film, To Five Bloods. Well, so Kevin, welcome and congrats on a job well done with To Five Bloods.
Thank you, sir.
And of course, congrats on winning an Oscar, sir, because the last time I saw you in Los Angeles, we did a screening for BlacKkKlansman, and
Yes.
it was during the awards season. And I guess that's as good a place as any to start. What would you say your biggest lesson was from BlacKkKlansman, looking back a few years now, having that distance from it?
Wow. Well, I think, this is probably screenwriter type stuff, but
And filmmakers in general, sure.
yeah, but I think probably the biggest thing is, just always trying to remind yourself of just making the story work as a movie. you know, that I
Making it filmic, basically.
yeah, I mean, you know, I think, you know, especially when you're adapting things that I always try to have a real respect for the facts and for, you know, the truth of it all and for the real story of it all, and you know, you just try to be respectful to all that as much as possible, and we did that as much as we could, but there's becomes a moment where, you know, you've got to do that same thing for it just to be a movie that works, you know, just that, you know, the reality of how movies work, you've got to give that much kind of credence to that as well.
And before we
And
get into the details of Da 5 Bloods, actually, just while you're talking about this, do you have an example that you could use of a scene that maybe wasn't feeling as cinematic in Black Klansman that you had to kind of finesse a little, that kind of comes to mind now when you're talking about that?
well, I think it more than a scene, it was really kind of the ending of the film, because in, you know, Ron Stallworth was too good of a policeman, really, and they the bad guys, the Klan guys, didn't get to do what they really wanted to do, and it seems so obvious, really, but there was really not much of an ending for the film, you know, and I literally kind of had to make the whole ending up being, trying to keep it within the spirit of what really did happen. I mean, what really did happen was they wanted to blow this gay nightclub up, and
Right.
they shut it down. They shut the bad, you know, the Klan down before they could do it. But it was really just, you know, uh, and you know, I think the first writers really struggled with that, and so, you know, you're always having to kind of know when to go the extra step and really just kind of use your creativity to really make something work when the realities are not there.
Well, and it's the concept of historical fiction, basically, in which you need some dramatic invention sometimes to carry the story because you're not making a documentary.
That's exactly right, and that sounds so obvious, but I think for me anyway, as a, you know, when I'm writing, you know, I get so caught up in the reality of it all, that and you know, and you, because you know, you're trying to kind of use that to make it honest and authentic, right? But you know, there comes a moment where you have to break out of that entirely, really, and just make it work as a movie. Just make it work as a movie.
You've been co-writing with Spike Lee since Chirac, a film that I love, by the way. And I'm just
Thank you.
curious if you could tell us how your relationship creatively has changed with him over the years. Like, I'm sure you're probably at more of a, you know, finishing each other's sentence type of stature right
Right.
now than you were when you first worked together. And I'm just curious if you
Yeah.
could map that out for us, because it's really interesting to hear how longtime writing partners work off each other.
Well, it was interesting. I just saw in an article today that he said that we are, how did he phrase it? Uh, that, you know, we're just kind of, you know, we just have a natural kind of rapport in a sense. And I think what he kind of means by that is, we kind of come from the same belief system, I think, you know, and that helps a lot, I think, when you are writing with someone. I mean, you know, we kind of can finish each other's sentences. I mean, we kind of have you know, a common understanding that, you know, I know what he's thinking. You know, he knows kind of probably what I'm, you know, going to try to do. And all that stuff kind of comes from not just writing together, but kind of, you know, we're about the same age, and you know, we both went to NYU. Not that that matters all that much, but you know, there's a lot of shared kind of experiences that we've had, and but I think more than anything, you know, he's a political guy. I'm a political guy. You know, we both kind of believe in fighting for justice. We both kind of, you know, believe in the power of movies, and you know, we're both professors as well. Him at NYU, me in Kansas. And so I think all of that just gives us so many links that we kind of know where each other's coming from.
You know, you mentioned politics a second ago, and before we get to Five Bloods, we're in the middle of historic times right now, in which the Black Lives Matter movement has really come to the forefront, even beyond when it started, and it had a very big voice. And I'm just curious, curtailing that into the Hollywood experience of working within the film industry, is there anything that you think that people should know about good ways to move forward and better practices that maybe either haven't previously been in place or have previously been in place but really haven't been executed properly?
Well, I guess probably my biggest pet peeve would really be that I just seem to always kind of run into um, distributors, executives, whatever you want to call it, that think they know but they don't know, and uh, and I think that's been one of the good things that's come out of the George Floyd horror, has been that people have kind of been checked a little bit. And kind of what I'm getting at is that people will say, oh, that's, we've seen that movie before, but they really haven't seen that movie before, or they think they know this and they just easily dismiss it. But this is really something that's incredibly important to Black people, that they just kind of dismiss, right, like it's nothing. And I can't really give you specifics really, but more than anything, it deals a lot with how racism is depicted in films, and they kind of feel like they know that story, or they're kind of bored with that story. And then something like George Floyd happens, this horrible moment happens in American life, and suddenly everybody's putting out how much they care about the struggle. But often when you are writing movies and making movies and trying to distribute movies, they'll dismiss those movies about racism like we've seen that before, we've done that before.
Well, and the joke is, I'm the biggest Shakespeare fan ever, but they've been doing Shakespeare for 400 years. Like, we know those stories as well. So the thing is, there's always a new story for a new generation to tell, and I think that's kind of overlooked sometimes.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. I mean, same thing could apply to Five Bloods. Like, there's a lot of great Vietnam films, but this one hasn't been told really.
Right.
And so, that's kind of one of my big ones is, and this I think is where, Hollywood and society connect together, because that problem we're talking about, I think, has more to do with society than it does with Hollywood. I think it is kind of the belief systems, the way we see the world, the way we interact in everyday life leaks over to how decisions are made in Hollywood. And that's where that problem, I think, really comes from.
Well, and it would seem that also categorizing African-American writers as solely being able to only write about racial injustice and forgetting all the other genre in films is also a huge miscalculation as well. So it would seem that there's growth for that as well.
No doubt about it. And one of the things that I think we kind of do in Five Bloods even is, we mix up a lot of different genres. And that's something I try to do in my work. That's something that I think links Spike and myself together as well, that we're well versed in just kind of film. And so we can mix things up, and a lot of the Hollywood establishment kind of goes, oh, you can't mix that up. That's
right.
You can't do it. You're breaking the rules, and it's like, I'm a big Woody Allen fan. I love Woody Allen, and Woody Allen has done that for years. There's a lot of, great filmmakers that have done that for years. And so, I think, that's just another example of that.
Well, let's get into the Five Bloods. The script credit is shared with Paul DeMeo, who passed away in 2018, and also Danny Bilson. And I'm guessing they wrote an original draft of this concept. Tell me about how you came on with Spike, and what shape the script was in, and just some of the early development of it. Obviously, just like last time, we're going to have a spoiler-specific section that we'll get into a little later. But just
Sure.
feel free to tell us where it started and what it was like when you came on.
Well, Paul and Danny wrote a really fine script, and so it started out, strong, and I think more than anything, Spike and I saw it as an opportunity to really kind of make it a Black story, and to really kind of make it that Vietnam story that we hadn't seen before in the sense of Black veterans. And um, there'd been a couple small films made about it, but nothing that was really about the Black Vietnam experience. So that was kind of first where it started, and
Sorry,
then
sorry to interrupt. Was Paul and Danny's screenplay about the African American Vietnam experience?
no, they had one character. One of the five guys was Black,
Okay.
uh, but it was just kind of your more kind of common Vietnam experience, where kind of about how most of those you know um, couplings of soldiers typically were.
And what
And
year was it written in? What was their first draft written in, if you remember? Because I know
you know,
I know he passed away in 2018, so obviously it was before that.
yeah, it was I think it was about 5 years ago, something like that, from 18. I mean, it had been around for a little bit,
Okay.
and I believe Oliver Stone was connected to it before
Oh, that's
Spike
interesting.
got it. Um, but they had a really strong core script, and it was more of an adventure film really than it is now. I think it's still an adventure film in a lot of ways, but we just added a lot of other kind of elements to it and brought out some of the other elements that were already there a lot more. Specifically, we brought the flashback in. We brought the Storm and Norman character in. Um, that because that was I think one of the big themes for us was really the brotherhood of them all. And that was different from the original script. Was that there was clearly a camaraderie there, but and a veteran camaraderie and a veteran brotherhood, but Black veterans had a different scale of brotherhood than I think a lot of other soldiers had, and mainly because there's a war going on back home, as well as the war that
Right.
they're in at the time. So they're fighting for rights they don't have. They're fighting for rights that are being fought for back home, and they're just totally torn between these two struggles. And Vietnam was already an unpopular war, and so they're just in a horrible mix of things, and that created a unity among those soldiers that was really, really kind of unique and really pretty profound. And that's where the terms like bloods and all of those terms come from, and all the dap handshakes and all the things that we kind of have fun with in the film. That stuff was very deadly serious because they had to kind of hold each other together in so many different ways. So that was, and so the Storm and Normie character is the embodiment of that. This is there was the revolution that's happening back home is happening for these guys in Vietnam. Black history is being read for the first time in a real popular kind of way, and Black is Beautiful is coming out, and guys
Well,
are
and as they say in the film, Norman is educating them while they were on
Norman is
patrol.
educating. Yes, and that stuff was very real. That's the stuff that was happening with guys at that time. So we brought all of that element out of it, and so much of Black kind of culture and hipness and that you still see today. A lot of that came out of Black veterans in Vietnam. They brought that stuff back, the handshakes, shotgun, where they guys would smoke weed through a shotgun. I mean, that stuff, all that stuff came out of Vietnam. And there's so many cultural things that we just kind of take for granted that were part of that very specific, unique experience.
Where in your timeline did you guys become involved with the script? Was Black Klansman already in production, or had it finished at the time that you guys started developing it?
Boy, I'm so horrible with time. We are. It was definitely finished before we started writing it,
Okay.
and uh, I'm pretty sure it was all the way. We had definitely done shooting all of that. We may have gotten involved with it before the premiere though.
And
So
and at what point did Netflix become involved? Like, because obviously Black Klansman was a studio film, but the interesting thing about having Netflix involved is there's an equalizer as a distributor, in which rather than waiting for a film that might be considered by some to be specialty, which only comes to certain places, it's this Friday, it's going to be in everybody's pocket, that's a Netflix subscriber in the world. They don't even have to leave the house. So it seems like that's an equalizer too, to get films into people's living rooms that might have not previously been there. So I'm curious at what point they became involved.
I think we wrote our draft. Spike and I did, and then we kind of went out shopping. They kind of went out shopping it,
Sure.
and it was shortly after that that Netflix came aboard. So they were on, I think, pretty. They were the only ones. It was not a big kind of process. I mean, they bought into it pretty quick.
And how long did it take you guys to write your first draft?
You know, typically it takes us about 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks.
That's it?
And yeah,
Really?
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
so how long is your outlining period before you start writing, or do you guys just jump in?
Yeah, what we always do is Spike will bring me out to his studio in Brooklyn, and we'll go through the script, and we'll kind of, you know, especially when it's an existing script that we're adapting and rewriting. So we go through and identify the stuff we like, kind of identify the stuff that we don't like, identify the stuff we want to change.
So did you kind of act like adapting a book in which you were putting, Post-it notes on it and breaking it into a new outline that you were going to do?
Yeah, and kind of introducing the new ideas that we wanted to bring to the film. The big idea specifically, the Storm and Norman character, and and the fact that the gold, was always going to kind of be for the folks back home. That Storm and Norman, the idea was that we're going to get this gold and give it to the brothers and sisters back home. I mean, those kind of notions, big notions, we kind of figure that all out together. And then, go through the script and kind of identify where, we can place some of these changes.
It's just wild. You outlined it and you basically rewrote your first draft in 3 or 4 weeks. That's super fast, and that's great.
Yeah, I mean, well, one of the things that really is great working with Spike is that he knows what he wants. I mean, and one of the hard things about working for other folks is they oftentimes don't know what they want. And you can spend a lot of money, a lot of time, probably add money later, but mainly time, just bouncing around things that people don't know if they like or not. And when they don't know where they're really headed, that a lot of time is wasted. So, one of the great things about Spike, he's going to direct the film. He's looking at it as a director, as we're writing it. And so we're making changes, not just in terms of the script, but we're making in terms of how the movie's going to play and how it's going to be directed.
I've interviewed. Sorry, go on. Sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say I've interviewed a lot of writing partners, and sometimes they're in the same room and they're really like, one talks, one types. Sometimes they're running off and on their own laptops in the same room, and sometimes they're in different cities just trading scenes back and forth. So I'm curious if there was like one, unique total draft that you guys were trading back and forth that one of you was keeping track of scene by scene, or if you guys were in the same draft at the same time all the time.
Well, what we do is I typically write the first draft. So
okay, so you write it.
We kind of map the whole thing out. We kind of decide what the new stuff we're going to bring in. I go back to Kansas. I write the new draft with everything that we've kind of discussed in it. I try to figure it out the best I can. I send that to Spike in 3 or 4 weeks, and then he makes his changes, talks about what he likes, what he doesn't like. We'll write new scenes. Anything that comes to his mind, he'll send it back to me. I'll kind of incorporate that into the script. I'll finesse it a little bit. I'll change those things, and I'll discover things that I think are still problematic. I'll make those changes, send back to him. He will then give it, and so it goes back and forth like that.
Okay, so 2 questions on that. Sorry to geek out. One is, so does that mean that you had done a crack at the draft before you came to Spike Studios on your own, or your first? Okay, so you did the first crack together.
Yes. So
Okay.
well, when what together means is that I go to his studio, we sit together, we go through the entire script, and we talk about what we like, what we don't like. We identify things. We identify this would be a good place to deal with this. This will be a good place to introduce the flashbacks. This will be the good place. And so we'll share those ideas together, and then I'll go back and write that stuff.
Okay.
And then we just email the scripts back and forth after that.
So there's the other geeky question. When you email a script back and forth, are you just changing the date on it each time so you could keep track of which draft you're in? Because I know that's like a hairy process as well. And with so much back and forth, the fear is occasionally something get lost.
No doubt, man. Yeah, Spike's really pretty good about dates, and I'm horrible at that stuff. I'll change the date on each draft, but he's much better about keeping all of that sorted out. But yeah, that's really critical, and so we kind of do that, and then we get to a place where we submit it, say, to Netflix, and they look at it, and then the changes that happen after that are really where it's kind of part of the production draft process at that point.
Okay, and we'll get to that in 1 second. Just your own personal habit. When you sit down to write, how many hours do you write for a day? Or do you give yourself a page count to hit? And I know I've asked you this before, but it's just always interesting to hear how over the years, because I've been interviewing you since CSA. By the way, anybody that's hearing or seeing this podcast who has not seen Kevin Willmott's film, CSA, which premiered at Sundance back in, oh my God, is it?
2004.
2004. Yeah. I was going to say 6, but yeah, it's 2004. It's a masterwork, and I think you could rent it on Amazon, right? I think you could.
Yeah, that's Hulu. It's on Hulu right now.
And it's on Hulu. That's even better.
You can rent it on Amazon too. That's right.
Yeah. So I mean, like, there's no excuse to miss that movie, because it's an amazing Twilight Zone kind of movie that was just awesome. But yeah. So pages versus hours a day.
Yeah. It's more about hours probably for me. I'll start early, often about 5:30, 5 in the morning, something like that. Sometimes if I can't sleep, I'll get up earlier. And I'll, write until I get tired, until I kind of hit a roadblock or can't figure it. And I'll take breaks in between. I'll go and, look at some TV or, whatever, but I'll stop and start. It depends on what's going on. Typically, I would say the typical day would be 6-7 hours.
Okay.
But if I got a deadline, it cranks up a lot more. But it's not so much pages as the feeling it's moving forward. See how certain things are harder to write than others, and when you get past certain difficult sections of a script, if it takes all day to write 2 pages, but you finally have figured this out, that's a huge. You got to give yourself a little credit. I mean, that's a huge step forward.
Sure.
Especially when the pages to come after that will be easier or more. You understand them better. So that's kind of how I try to keep it in my head.
Well, so, you know, the final question on that about your process would be, what do you do if you get writer's block? How do you battle it if you get it?
Well, I always tell my students, I don't think there's such thing as writer's block.
Okay,
You know,
okay.
I think writer's block is just not knowing what to do. And it's not that your system is saying, I don't know. And I think it's just, that may exist in novels or something, but I think in movies, it's just trying to figure it out more than it is a block. And so what I do is, I always tell my students, get out of the chair, you know, get out of the chair. The chair should be a place of love and comfort, and you want to go to that thing first thing in the morning, and you don't want it to be ever a bad place to be. So when you're stuck, get out of your chair, go someplace else. I used to go to video stores.
Oh
I used to
yeah,
go
to
to,
like look at to look at movies?
yeah, I would just look at movies and read the back of shit, and just, just the vibe of movies in a video store was so great, because you just all these crazy movies, right? And also I go to a library quite often, and libraries are really great for me, just in terms of getting new ideas and kind of anything that comes to mind. If they typically got something right there, same thing with bookstores. So, I just try to get out of my chair, get out of my house, go out in the world and kind of revive whatever the things is that I'm dealing with at the time.
Well, I guess in the case of this movie, so when you would take one of those bookstore trips or something to the library, would you stay on topic and look at Vietnam books, or would you try and like mix it up to free your mind and look at, I'm making this up, film noirs or
Sure,
sci-fi
right,
or something else? Which is your preference? Because some writers get trapped in more research when they feel stuck,
right,
and I know that that's something that could happen to anybody, and it's
right.
sometimes endless is the problem.
Right. Yes. Yeah. That's a tricky one. I kind of try to do a little bit of both. One thing I always keep in mind when I go to the video store or the library or whatever it is, that if I'm feeling frustrated about Vietnam right now, that I don't. That's not the first place I'm going to go to. I'm going to go to something that just kind of I enjoy more than anything. It's kind of, you're gonna kind of go to the guilty pleasure section, and and just vibe on that for a minute, and just kind of remind yourself how much you like movies and how much you love movies, and then eventually I drift back to kind of the subject matter of the film. But I think for me it's always kind of about reminding yourself of the love you have of all of this, and that gets my juices going again typically, and then I usually will find something that is connected to what I'm working
All right. Well, so last question before we get to the spoilers, because I have plenty more to ask and I want to hear more about Netflix's notes and stuff like that. But what was the budget and schedule once you guys did get greenlit?
on. Man, I am horrible at that stuff. Uh, I think, I'm not sure what the budget was. I saw in the paper today they said something like 60 million, something like that.
Okay. Okay.
Uh, I have no idea if that's true or
Sure.
not. And
The shoot schedule.
in terms of the schedule, Spike left right after we won the Oscar. I mean, literally, he was on a plane, I think, that next day.
Oh, wow.
And so the pre-production, all of that. I think it took about 2 to 3 months to make the film. It was a big film, and anytime you're dealing with the jungle and you're dealing with most of it was shot in Thailand, just a little bit in Vietnam. Anytime you're dealing with that kind of terrain and those kind of conditions and all of that stuff, it's really challenging. And I've not really talked to him about how hard it was, but I know this was a hard film for him to make.
So podcast listeners, YouTubers, we're going to get into the spoilers section. If you have not seen Da 5 Bloods, please go to Netflix, take a look. You've been forewarned, because now we're going to talk about the ins and the outs of it. I guess a good place to start would be Netflix's notes. What kind of notes did Netflix have once they had seen the draft, and how much rewriting did you need to do?
Well, to be honest with you, we had to clarify some things, kind of discussions. What does this really mean? And those kind of questions, which is kind of typical when you kind of dealing with the specifics of kind of the cultural specifics of, the world that we're dealing with. I mean, these are not kind of things people kind of know about every day, think about every day, talk about every day. So there's always a lot of little notes like that, really. And
was
so
there
we
any
kind of,
big specific change that you remember?
there was no big, huge change. I mean, there's always the typical things that you are wanting from notes, which is, more of that, less of this, that kind of stuff. And so they were all pretty generic notes. And I think, again, that's one of the virtues of kind of working with Spike, is that I think he has, they kind of give him a certain, I wouldn't say carte blanche, but I think they give him a certain degree of respect that, that the notes the notes they give, that we responded to all of them in our own way, in Spike's own way. And then again, from that, you just really kind of getting the notes again from after you shoot the film. So
That makes sense.
So I think there's an element of that, may be more notes at that point than you really get within the script, because of I think because of his respect as a director.
Hey, yeah, I'm jumping in really quick just to remind you to subscribe to Backstory Magazine, because your support is crucial these days. If you'd like to subscribe, you could use coupon code SAVE5 over at backstory.net. That'll get you $5 off a 1-year subscription. You could read the last year's worth of past issues via our archive, which we will be adding new stuff to as well. And you'll help support us for issue 42, our new issue that we're working on, in the works on. It's going to have a lot of great content, some of which I have been working on for like 5 to 8 years to get into the magazine, that has finally come through. So your support is crucial. We would love to have you. Going to backstory.net and subscribing is the easiest way to do it. It'll also give you credentials to use in case you have an iPad. So you don't need to do it through Apple. You could do it right at backstory.net. And we would love to have you, and definitely appreciate your support. By the way, in case you don't know, this is as good a time to tell you as any. If you would like to watch this interview that you're listening to, possibly in iTunes or Spotify, you could go to Backstory Magazine's YouTube page and you could watch the Zoomcast there. It's kind of a new thing, so I'm still talking about it to let people know in case they weren't aware of it. But since this is done as a Zoomcast, we have the video for it. So if you want to watch us talk, you now can. But now, without any further ado, let's get back into our chat with co-writer Kevin Willmott about his latest feature, Da 5 Bloods, which you could watch starting today in Netflix. I mean, I think it was interesting that one place to ground it was with Hanoi Hannah. And sadly, this is not the first time audiences probably have seen or heard of this, because the Germans sent out the same messages to African-American soldiers in World War I and World War II. There were similar messages during the Korean conflict. I mean, this is not a new case. And I'm curious, just, overall as a question, this would speak to showing I know that you guys filmed her scenes, obviously, for your movie, but you also were intercutting real historical speeches and historical moments. And I'm curious at what point those concepts came in. Was it in the script stage, or was the kind of momentum of that something that you discovered could work in editing?
No, that was all in the script stage,
Including all the speeches and stuff like that.
Yes, very much.
Interesting.
Very much so. I mean, one of the things that I think Spike likes about me, and this is kind of what I was getting at earlier, is that whenever I go down a path like, like Hanoi Hannah. I'm going to make sure that existed. I'm going to make sure that as much as I can, and I'll look it up as I'm writing it. I mean, that's not something that I just make choices and then explain later to someone. None of that's true or something. I'm going to go through that whole process while I'm writing, and so I found most of that as I was writing. And that was a concept that we kind of came up with her. I think when I mentioned to Spike about the conflict about Dr. King was assassinated when while the war was going on, and that was a huge moment for Black soldiers, and that was a huge propaganda value for the Viet Cong at the time. And so I found that stuff online, and then it's just about incorporating that into the story in the way it really works for us. But all of sometimes the documentary footage is not incorporated in the script, but it's hinted at in various ways.
Well, right. I'm guessing in the script you didn't start off with the Muhammad Ali quote that the movie starts off with. That was probably something that was found in editing, right? To where you just realized it would fit there.
Yes, indeed. And I think that what Spike also I think does, and this is something he brings himself to all of this, is he's going to look at every documentary that he can find about Black soldiers in Vietnam.
Sure.
And he's going to, we talked about the Ken Burns series when we were working on it.
Excellent series.
All of that stuff. And so I think a lot of times he sees those films. We did that with Black Klansmen. We watched a lot of documentaries about the Klan. And so he's looking for visual things, things like Ali and those kind of things were so iconic at the time. And so he's looking to kind of bring in those iconic references that were really special for that period.
Yeah, and it sets the period as well. It's interesting because I would be remiss if I didn't bring it up. It's obvious as all hell, but clearly there's a big Treasure of the Sierra Madre influence here. And they even say that we don't need no badges line at a certain point. Right. Was that inherent in the previous draft, or was that something that you and Spike added to it? Because it was good to see it in this context.
Yeah, well, Spike, that's one of our film professor geek kind of things that we get into. It was in the original script a little bit. Spike really liked that a lot. We, at his office, we sat and watched Treasure of the Sierra Madre together. And that was just fun to watch that film, I think when we first started out, we thought that part of it was going to be, I think, a little more important than it ended up being later on. But that's kind of, that's how writing works. You kind of, you kind of embrace the thing that is going to be part of it. You kind of, drink that in as much as you can, and then you end up using, 5% of it. And, but it really connected to Paul's character specifically, that Paul definitely goes through kind of a Humphrey Bogart kind of, insane hysteria there at that section of the film. And that was always in the script. We just brought it out more and had a little more fun with it and put it within Paul's point of view.
Yeah, I could see it baked in because it's a group of guys that are friends that are falling apart over money. So it's really inherent. But it was cool the way that you guys handled it as well. The benefit of an ensemble cast is that you get a bunch of robust roles, but it's also sometimes a curse because you have a lot of characters to flesh out. And this was, definitely some heavy lifting was done here for ensemble writing. What were some of the challenges? Because, you basically have Paul, David, Otis, Melvin, and Eddie, and then all the periphery,
right.
of the people.
Right.
You have the, his previous Vietnam girlfriend and his daughter. You have the villain who we'll talk about in a moment. You have
Sure.
the tour guide. So I mean, and the people that are the minesweepers. So it's like you had a kind of bigger than expected cast here. And did
Yeah.
you find it difficult to manage time for everybody to make sure that they at least had their moment of sorts?
Yeah, well, that is one of the trickier parts of making a film like this. No doubt about it. And the rule for me has always kind of been, get them off stage when they're finished. When their function is completed, then get them off, and because that's where you really can run off the road and end up in the ditch. When people are hanging around longer than they should be, and in a part of the story, and really kind of one of the good things about rewriting this movie is that it's all there, and then what you are bringing new to it, you kind of understand from your take on the whole story at this point. And that gives you, it's like you get to look at the whole picture, from the very beginning, and that just helps a lot, because that helps you to eliminate and expand, and that's what it's all about: eliminating and expanding. And each of those characters has their very specific function in the story, and knowing when to cut that off is, I think, probably the most challenging, important part of the whole way a script works that way. And the character part of it is the fun part of it, but you can't let that, you can't have too much fun with that, because that ends up taking over, and that's how you get off in the ditch a lot of times.
Obviously one of the antagonists in the movie becomes the character named DeRoach. For a movie called Da 5 Bloods, sounding out DeRoach kind of slowly, like you kind of nailed it. And it's interesting because he's a true villain because he wants to capitalize on their efforts. But
Right.
when they run up against the Vietnamese police militia unit that he implores, thematically, something that you and Spike did really well was, if you're using Norman's concept of redistributing the money to good causes, you obviously already had one there with the minesweepers that were trying to undo the
Right.
damage of the past that's still haunting us in the present, with children stepping on mines that are so old that still explode. But really, there was just this great monologue moment for the head of that militia when they were talking about whose money is it really, and he brings up the My Lai massacre and talks about redistribution of wealth towards Vietnamese who had suffered. I'm curious at what point you realized that you could take that concept and remove it from being even just primarily American, and or some of the greed that was a part of Paul's original path before he kind of sees the light, and
Yes.
get to that moment where the person that's hunting them, pursuing them, and by the way, killing them, and they're killing,
Right.
even
Right.
says, we want to take it for a better cause as well.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, and I have to say that was something Spike was really kind of, keen on from the very beginning. I mean, we wanted to make sure that the Vietnamese characters were not stereotypes. We wanted to make sure that, because they come in as kind of a gang in the end there, and it's easy to fall into those traps of stuff we've seen in movies too many times. And so so Spike was really great about really, exemplifying that whole concept you just described of really making sure that they had their point of view, and their point of view, is just as justified as the black soldier's point of view. And I think it just adds another level of complication to the film, and I think that Spike's always good about, embracing that, and I'm always trying to find ways to do that. But I have to give Spike credit on this. I mean, that was really his very clear kind of motive from the very beginning. And then it was really about with Ben, his character, just making sure that he didn't end up kind of in the stereotypical kind of action movie, adventure movie kind of guide, how oftentimes bad things happen to those characters and they're kind of
Right.
used as cannon fodder. And and I know specifically I didn't want to do that, and Spike, I think, liked my choice on that. And so and I think it just adds another level of satisfaction to the film in the end when you see, that he gets a piece of the action too.
Yeah. You're talking about the tour guide.
Yes.
Yes. You switched from the militia to the tour guide, just making sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I'm talking about both.
But it's interesting also that, Spike's always had a thing in his work where he likes to break the fourth wall and sometimes have a character talk directly to the audience. In this movie, though, Paul is talking to a ghost, and he has those very extensive monologues in the jungle. And I'm curious what you could tell me about conceiving and writing those. And then the ultimate payoff is that, what a viewer who's been paying attention should know all along is that even though we weren't seeing it, he was talking to the ghost of Norman.
Yeah, so that was probably our biggest, invention of the film, was that Paul actually killed Norman, and that
Friendly
Paul,
fire,
the friendly fire, and that Paul's torment is really all connected to that, and he's been tormented by that, since 1968. But I think when I discovered that and made that choice, and Spike really liked it, and what's great about these kind of choices is that we don't even have to discuss it. I mean, it's like, I'll make that choice and he'll read it, and if I can't make it work, then he'll tell me, and if it's working, he won't mention it. And that's a kind of a confidence he has in me, and that's an assurance I have in him that we're both on the same page. And so that wasn't even really discussed. That was not one of the planned things that we mapped out early on. It was one of the things that, you end up discovering as you're writing the script, and it's like, oh shoot, this needs to happen,
I always love something in screenwriting that deals with a character having a secret. And there's always a debate as to when you reveal the secret. Now, I couldn't see you changing this too much in editing, but did you ever consider letting it be revealed to the audience earlier that part of Paul's madness was that guilt, and that this was kind of a journey of reconciliation in that respect? Or did it always fall that it was going to be in the last 8 minutes of the movie or so?
Yeah, no, that was always my idea.
Okay.
And I think that was a given. I mean, it's a too big of a secret and a reveal to give it away any sooner, really. It's the defining thing for Paul, but in a lot of ways, it's the defining thing of the entire film, really, because if Norman was a great soldier, and he wouldn't have got killed if that hadn't happened to him. I mean, he was too good at what he did. It was an accident had to kill him,
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it was a given that it would have to be at the end that way.
That makes sense. I'm curious, were you on set during production? Were there any rewrites that were needed during production, even if you weren't on set?
I don't think they did much of that. I was only there for about a week.
Okay.
But more than anything, I think, the camaraderie and brotherhood thing that happens with the guys in the film, that I think really adds another level to everything. I think there is just a lot of ad-libbing, and just that whole camaraderie thing, was a lot of little bits comes out of that are probably in the film that were not in the actual script.
Oh, okay.
But that's what's, great about working with a director that knows his actors and is going to give them the freedom to kind of do their thing.
I'm curious, editing is the last stage of storytelling. And, you have a movie that was like 2 hours and 24 minutes. I'm curious, what were some of the things that were cut out? And did you always intention to have your story go with that runtime? Was that always something that you were going to be hitting? Or did you think it was going to be longer or shorter?
Well, I knew it was probably going to be a pretty big film.
Yeah.
And I think Spike always saw this as, we joked about, David Lean and that kind of stuff.
Right.
So I think he knew that was kind of the effort from the very beginning. There were only a couple. There was actually one scene that was written there, not by me. It was written by Spike that we ended up cutting later on. But as a whole, there wasn't any huge cuts. I mean, typically what happens is scenes are just shorter and those kind of things. But
so there's no section of the movie that you feel like you're missing or anything like that, or that would be on a DVD of extras.
Yeah, no, and that was the same kind of thing with BlacKkKlansman too, was that BlacKkKlansman didn't have a lot of extra, in fact, the editor told me that, there were no deleted scenes, that there's scenes that are a lot shorter than they were written, things like that, but no deleted scenes.
What was your most personal moment? There's always something that a writer is able to get into a screenplay that just means something uniquely to them, whether it's, a name of a childhood friend or a person or a place or anything like that, a prop, a song. What was something that was really personal to you that we wouldn't know unless you told us?
Well, one of the things that was probably personal to me on the overall was, and I grew up in a little small town called Junction City, Kansas, and it's adjacent to Fort Riley, and the Big Red One is in Fort Riley, and that's the 1st Infantry Division, and the guys in the film, they wear the patch of the Big Red One, so that was part of it. But one of the ones I was able to slip in was they talk about Operation Junction City, which was an actual battle in Vietnam that was named after my hometown, and so I was able to use that in the film, and it survived. So I was kind of pleased about that.
That's cool.
But that's my little hometown little piece that I gave props to the peeps back home.
Yes, indeed. And what was your toughest scene? It's always interesting to hear about how you tackle a creative challenge. So what was the scene that you kept sweating, that you came back to over and over again, and how did you make it through it as a writer, even if it was your 30th rewrite or whatever it was?
Sure. Well, that's interesting. I mean, the good thing about this film was that there was nothing in it that I didn't really understand, and I think part of it was because I grew up around a lot of veterans and grew up in, I knew the history very well, all of that stuff. So I felt really at home with it. So that helped me a great deal. I think probably, the creation of the flashbacks and specifically the friendly fire was probably the biggest. I mean, it wasn't that I was looking for that, but I knew we needed something that kind of connected it all together and made going back to Vietnam more important than just a goal. And that wasn't so much a hard scene, but it was like a giving birth scene. You know what I mean? It's like you're having to go around the block the long way many times for this to come out and for you to find that moment.
What were some of the bad iterations of it? Was there anything you remember that you just, when you wrote it, you're like, this is placeholder, I'm going to fix it later?
Yeah, and it wasn't one of those. It was more about trying to figure out what that was, what the issue was going to be. And it came to me fairly quickly in a way, but as you're moving toward what that section of the movie is going to be, I had no clue what it was going to be, but I knew there was a hole there, and as you move closer to it, the nice thing about this movie was that it kind of organically kind of happened. It really kind of, you were feeling it, and it kind of naturally revealed itself, which oftentimes is not the case. I mean,
yeah,
most of the times you're beating your head, and days and days and days of sitting in a chair trying to figure it out. And that one kind of, the birth came easily, and the placement of it came easily too. It all kind of nicely revealed itself. And I mean, and that's really rare. I mean,
sure.
It's a miracle when that stuff happens, really.
How many drafts would you say you wrote?
I think drafts are kind of a hard term, but because a draft to me means a lot of changes between each one. I would say we only had about 3 drafts.
Okay. That makes sense.
But as our first draft was, it wasn't a bullseye, but we were in those couple circles outside of that, and we felt pretty good about it. And then after that was just moving in closer and closer.
I forgot to ask earlier, but one of the things that was really execution dependent, and if anybody could pull it off, it's Spike Lee, was the decision to not recast younger versions of these actors and to use them as their older selves, but still within the scenes with, young Norman. Was that always the plan from the beginning, or did that just kind of materialize over time?
That was always the plan from the beginning.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And Spike was really clear about that. That was something that we specifically, when we talked about doing flashbacks, he from the very beginning said, I'm not going to have them use younger actors. I'm not going to do the special effects. I'm not going to do that whole thing.
Right, because there could be special effects, there could be younger actors, and you guys actually just chose a dramatic convention that would be used if it was a play, really. Use the same actors and change the lighting.
Yeah, and there's a couple lines that I think a couple of these were cut, but one of the concepts I tried to justify it with was, there's a couple of lines in there that talked about how war ages with you, that the memory of war, it never leaves you, and it grows old with you, and that whole thing of how war never leaves you, and how the memory of war never leaves you, and that it's not like you're young and you have this memory, when you're 70 years old and you look back at what you went through when you're 20 years old, you're still that same person. And in a way, that's, I'd like to believe that's kind of what that visual kind of says.
That makes sense. I guess one thing that I just want to put out there so that people know that it was always in the script, because I would really guess it was. Some people think that, oh, what if the Black Lives Matter ending scene was added due to recent events? But I'm sure it was not, because they've been relevant this whole time. So could you just, for the record, clarify that it was always in your script, if it was, unless I'm wrong?
No, it was always, well, that was part of what Spike and I did. And when we decided to, kind of fulfill the mission of what Storm and Norman had for the gold, they were a natural choice. And with each of those people you see in the end and how the gold fits them, that was I really enjoyed writing that part of the film, because I thought there was going to be a really satisfying ending. Never did I ever think, and I'm sure that never did Spike think, that it would have to take on this whole other level of power now with what's happened.
What's next for you? Well, the last film you directed, I think, was The Prophet, and
yes.
I'm curious what you're going to direct next, or what you've been fiddling around with as a writer. What's on your slate?
Well, I have a new film that will be out hopefully fairly soon here. It's called The 24th.
Okay.
And it really connects with what's happening today too. It's It's about the 24th Infantry Division, black soldiers again, who were sent in 1917. 700 black soldiers were sent to Houston, Texas, to guard the building of this thing called Camp Logan, which was a place to train soldiers to go to World War I. And the Houston police were just horrible, just horrible, horrible, horrible. And they brutalized these guys, and, you know, just Jim Crow and the whole. And 150 soldiers marched on Houston and went after the police. And it ended up in the largest murder trial in American history. And no one knows about this story.
Wow.
But it's, you know, I found this photograph of 64 guys on trial at one time, black soldiers.
Wow.
And that photograph just blew my mind. And I wrote the script about 20 years ago, and it's taken me this long to get it made. I rewrote it with Trey Byers, who plays the lead in the film. Trey Byers from the TV show Empire.
Yeah.
So kind of be looking for that hopefully soon. It'll be, it's called The 24th. And
who's it being released by?
We're just in the process of
talking
to the distributor now, but I think we'll know something in the next few weeks here.
Yeah, feel free to reach out to me at backstory.net anytime, because I'd love to stay on that. Yeah, I guess just a follow up to that, when you look at a script that's something that was earlier on in your career that you wrote, how much updating would you say you needed? Or since it's a historical piece, would you say that you pretty much nailed the period and it just revealed some minor fiddling? I mean, obviously, if you were rewriting with an actor, I could see some dramatic license being added as well. But how much of a rewrite would you say you did from that draft?
Well, you know, that's a really good question. I think the core of the film was definitely from what I originally had written. And but you know, as time went on, I kind of felt like that. Well, my mission for the film kind of changed a bit, and how I saw the film had changed a bit. And so when I always thought Trey would really be a great guy to play, the main character's name is Boston, based on a real guy that was in the middle of all the real events that happened. So obviously we went back and kind of specifically kind of formed it for knowing he's going to play the lead in it. Also, I wanted to kind of update the romantic angle of the film too, which I thought, you know, just needed some updating and expanding and some things like that. So yeah, I mean, you know, time kind of gives you, you know, it changes your point of view in various ways. It made me kind of refocus the film. I guess probably things that I changed and how society has changed in various ways. And so you kind of hopefully embrace all those things and come up with the last version.
Well, I can't wait to see it. It sounds amazing. And, you know, you've been so generous with your time as usual. So thanks again. And Kevin Willmott, congrats on another great film. And I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thanks, my friend. Good seeing you, buddy.
Good seeing you. And that's how the Q&A went down. Special thanks again to co-screenwriter Kevin Willmott for coming down to chat about his latest film, Da 5 Bloods. Now remember, you could watch Da 5 Bloods in Netflix, but I am begging you, I highly recommend you also watch Kevin's film CSA, which stands for Confederate States of America. You could watch it, as he said, on Hulu. You could also find it for rental on Amazon. It's just a great Twilight Zone-esque film, kind of about the terrible world that we would be living in if the South had won the Civil War. And Kevin not only wrote it, but he also directed it. And it's just always been a favorite film of mine. Of course, while you're surfing around online, I hope you'll check out my magazine, Backstory Magazine, over at backstory.net. And we would love your support. So if you want to subscribe, you could save $5 off a 1-year subscription by using coupon code SAVE5 at checkout at backstory.net. We hope you'll do it there rather than through Apple. So if you have an iPad, don't worry, you will still get access for your iPad by subscribing at backstory.net. And that's the only place that you could use a coupon also. You won't be able to use it through Apple. It only works at backstory.net. And remember, backstory.net could be read through a desktop and a laptop, and you could even test drive us because we have a free issue waiting right there for you. So if you've never read us, it is as good a time as any to check us out. Your subscription will also help support us as we are preparing issue 42, which will be our new issue that we've done under these kind of wild and crazy social distance times. And there's going to be a lot of cool stuff in there. I mean, there's an article that I've been working on for 5 to 8 years that will finally be in there because we've gotten the rights to some stuff that I've really wanted to show you guys for a long time. So it's crucial that we get your support. If you've supported this podcast for a long time, it would really mean a lot to me if you would consider subscribing to Backstory. So thanks for checking out backstory.net. The Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith is a copyright of Unlikely Films Incorporated in 2020. All rights reserved. I'm Jeff Goldsmith, the host of the Q&A, thanking you for tuning in and telling you to stay out of trouble. Till next week.